What if you lived in a world where you weren't at the top of the food chain? A world where something bigger, faster, and deadlier was always watching. For the first Americans, this wasn't just a nightmare, it was their reality. Mammoths, giant sloths, and camels roamed the land, but lurking in the shadows were the true apex predators. Saber-toothed cats with 11-inch fangs, giant cheetahs built for raw speed, and short-faced bears that could chase down prey at the speed of a galloping horse. So where did humans fit into this brutal hierarchy? Were they the fearless hunters, shaping the world with stone and spear? Or were they prey, just another species struggling to survive in a land ruled by giants? In this video, we're not just talking about the incredible animals these people lived alongside. We're examining the direct evidence of their encounters. And we're taking it one step further, putting their weapons to the test. Could a Clovis point really bring down a mammoth or stop a charging bear? And did fishtail points play a role in the extinction of Ice Age megafauna? Let's step back in time and find out. Our earliest unambiguous evidence of humans in the Americas are the footprints from White Sands National Park, dating between 21,000 to 23,000 years ago. However, two sites deep in Brazil, Pedra Ferrada and Toca de Chirapeia, hold evidence that, if verified, could push back the timeline of human presence in the Americas by thousands of years. Fortunately, the great Stefan Milo is diving into this fascinating debate over on his channel as part of our collaboration. After watching this video, be sure to check him out. He makes some of the best archaeology videos on YouTube. Anyways, whoever these early people were, genetic studies suggest that their lineage may have either gone extinct or been absorbed into later populations. The ancestors of modern Native Americans are believed to have migrated into the Americas between 15 and 16,000 years ago, based on ancient DNA evidence. There is certainly still a lot for us to learn about the early migrations into the Americas, and even more for us to learn about the earliest populations. However humans ultimately ended up in the Americas, they would enter a land absolutely teeming with megafauna. These animals would have had no instinctual fear when they met human hunters. As these humans settled into their new home, they would develop into deadly megafauna hunters. This can be said with certainty because megafauna just means an animal weighing over 45 kilograms or 100 pounds. These cultures were certainly hunting, as they were creating deadly stone points, and they are associated with the remains of massive animals including bison, ground sloth, and even mammoth. Dogs may have made it to the Americas even as early as 16,000 years ago, undoubtedly an invaluable asset to these people. We know from archaeological findings that Americans from 15,000 years ago onward began to develop increasingly sophisticated and deadly weaponry. This occurred in both North and South America. At the Deborah L. Friedkin site of central Texas, archaeologists have found evidence of complex stone tools dating over 15,000 years ago. These tools seem to be the technological predecessors to Clovis technology, including blades and complicated bifacial tools. This technology was such a breakthrough that in a matter of centuries, it spread throughout North, Central, and even parts of South America. To understand this spread, we must first understand the Clovis point. Clovis points are expertly made fluted points. They vary in shape, but are generally long and lanceolate. On average, they're between 4 to 5 inches in length. But there are some extraordinary examples, such as the Roots Clovis, which is over 9 inches long. What makes Clovis points unique is that they have two flutes at their base. These are made by taking large flakes off of both sides of the biface. This is a skillful and delicate process that often ends in catastrophic failure. These flutes are often thought to have provided space for a wooden haft to have attached more seamlessly to the point. A more seamless transition means less friction when entering a prey animal. Clovis points are thought to have been used in a number of ways. A larger point may have been used to butcher animals or a tip of a thrusting spear, but as it got smaller by resharpening, it may have become a projectile point. The use of relatively small points with evidence of impact damage suggests that Clovis people were throwing their points. They may have tipped lightweight javelins or likely the tips of darts propelled by a spear thrower. In order to conceptualize how powerful the weapons of the early Americans were, we are going to test them out on some ballistics gel and an animal gel block with replica ribs and organs. First, we are going to be testing out the spear thrower, also known as the atlatl or atlach. This ingenious weapon uses a lever to throw long darts much further and faster than could be thrown by hand. It has an effective hunting range of about 100 feet, but can be thrown well over 500 feet less accurately. The Clovis point had decent penetration into this gel block. Next, I threw a different stone point at the animal block. The results were devastating.
Oh my goodness, look at that. Right between the ribs is a perfect shot. Wow, that might be a dead animal right there.
This animal may have bled out quickly with the projectile still lodged in it. Next, we will be throwing a javelin with a Clovis Point foreshaft. A javelin can be thrown over 250 feet and can pack an incredible punch. When tipped with a Clovis Point, you can imagine just how deadly one of these would become. The results shocked me. The point smashed through the ribs and decimated the replica organ. Fake blood came gushing out. This would have been a dead deer, horse, or possibly even mammoth if thrown between the ribs. Perhaps you can understand just how deadly Paleo-American projectile technology was. Imagine 10 hunters all throwing stone-tipped darts in succession. This could have immobilized and incapacitated even the largest animals in the Americas. Now that we have an understanding of these people and their technology, let's finally talk about all of the animals they encountered. The first animal we have to talk about is the short-faced bear, a true giant of the Ice Age. Arctodus, commonly called the short-faced bear, is one of the most fascinating and terrifying predators that ever roamed North America. It is believed to be one of the largest known terrestrial carnivorans of all time. Adult individuals range between 660 to 2,100 pounds. When walking on all fours, males were up to 5'5" at the shoulder, tall enough to look the average human in the eye. When standing on their hind legs, males could be nearly 12 feet tall. With a wingspan of about 14 feet, this bear could slash you from terrifying distances, about 1 Shaquille O'Neal away. Sadly, I couldn't afford a full skeleton for demonstration. Maybe it is time for a GoFundMe. Anyways, researchers have hypothesized that the largest Arctodus could have weighed 2,600 pounds. This beast was truly a force to be reckoned with in the Pleistocene Americas. The name short-faced bear comes from its deep, broad snout, which looks shorter than it really is. This can be seen in the living relative of Arctodus called the spectacled bear. Its skull was also about as wide as it was tall, with incredibly strong jaws. Just look at the gap where its jaw muscles once were. It had a bite force of around 3,000 psi, which is 3 times the force of a grizzly bear and similar to that of an American alligator. Arctodus is also known for its long-legged appearance, though this is also an illusion. Compared to other bears, its limbs were of normal size, though its back and torso are much shorter. Still, its peculiar morphology has caused a lot of speculation about what this beast was adapted to. The diet of Arctodus was opportunistic and varied based on habitat and available resources. Primarily omnivorous, its diet included significant amounts of vegetation, indicated by dental adaptations for grinding plant matter. It also consumed meat, with stable isotope studies showing a reliance on browsing herbivores such as deer, camelids, and tapirs, particularly in areas with C3 vegetation. A lot of people don't know this, but the diet of grizzly bears located inland are between 80 to 90% plant-based. This of course can vary, since if meat is available, they will consume it. Evidence of elevated nitrogen-15 levels in some regions suggests that Arctodus scavenged or occasionally hunted megafauna, including juveniles of large species like mammoths or mastodons. Bone damage consistent with scavenging, as well as its large size and its likely dominance over other predators, indicates that it may have been a kleptoparasite, stealing kills from smaller carnivores. Arctodus combined browsing, opportunistic carnivory, and scavenging to thrive in various environments, ranging from open woodlands to tundra-like conditions in Beringia. The short-faced bear would have been a terrifying animal for humans to run into, and some have even hypothesized that it prevented humans from migrating into the Americas. In the late 1980s, biologist Val Geist hypothesized that aggressive and highly competitive fauna such as the short-faced bear prevented humans, moose, gray wolves, and brown bears from being able to migrate into North America. Male Arctodus may have been so dominant in finding and consuming resources that humans and other carnivores simply couldn't compete. As cool and dramatic as this idea sounds, it is now well established that humans lived alongside Arctodus for thousands of years. We know that humans have been in the Americas for over 20,000 years and widespread by 15,000 years ago, while Arctodus only went extinct around 13,000 years ago, meaning humans lived alongside these animals for over 7,000 years. As big and scary as Arctodus may have been, our direct evidence tells us that sometimes it was on the menu for human hunters. At the Lubbock Lake site, the Clovis people didn't just coexist with this beast, they butchered it. the animal was likely already deceased or perhaps even killed by these Clovis hunters. What we do know for sure is that the animal was butchered by these people. Cut marks indicate that the animal was skinned, defleshed, and disarticulated. It was even butchered in the same way that mammoths were. This bear may have already died or was mortally wounded when these people found it, though it is still fascinating to think that these people would have kept the skin of the animal, perhaps for clothing or shelter. Just imagine how insanely fashionable a short-faced bear coat would have been. At other sites in Ohio, Utah, and Idaho, Paleo-Indian artifacts have been found in direct association with short-faced bear remains. An Arctidus foot bone from Idaho was even charred in a fire, likely from human hunters. Human hunting and butchery of large megafauna such as elk, bison, mammoths, and mastodon would have likely put these people in competition with Arctidus. There would have been times where these people had to make the choice between starving to death or facing a 1,500-pound bear. These weren't just hunters, they were survivors. Though this sounds like an impossible challenge to us in the modern day, 20 skilled human hunters armed with spears and possibly spear throwers would have been a formidable force for even a 1,500-pound bear. Just imagine how many thrilling stories ancient humans had of encounters with these animals. Surviving in this world was certainly not for the faint of heart. The short-faced bear may have been the largest carnivore of Pleistocene North America, though another animal is arguably much more iconic. Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat. Smilodon was an apex predator, and its diet consisted mainly of large herbivores. Depending on the region, its prey included bison, camels, horses, mastodons, giant ground sloths, and even young mammoths. Rather than chasing down prey over long distances, Smilodon was an ambush predator, relying on stealth and explosive power. Its fangs grew up to 11 inches in the largest individuals. For perspective, the teeth of lions and tigers are only around 3 to 4 inches in length. Lions and tigers kill their prey by suffocation or by breaking their necks. Their short and strong teeth are perfect for this, but Smilodon employed a much different method. It is hypothesized that they used their powerful forelimbs to subdue prey before delivering precise, powerful bites to incapacitate them. Many wonder how Smilodon would have been able to even bite anything with such large teeth in the way. Smilodon was able to open its mouth wider than most cats, likely exceeding 110 degrees. Though they wouldn't have had much bite force while extended this far, their powerful necks would have allowed them to slice with considerable force. It is hypothesized that they may have attacked the stomachs of animals or with their jaws closed, though little evidence supports these conclusions. Their canines were relatively fragile compared to those of other predators and likely required Smilodon to carefully position its bite, targeting soft areas such as the throat or abdomen. Between 4 to 6% of Smilodon actually broke their canines during their lifetime. This is slightly higher than that of lions or tigers, but still interesting. Imagine an old Smilodon with one broken canine. It must have been an intimidating sight. Speaking of massive, how big were these saber-toothed cats? Well, there were 3 species. Smilodon gracilis from North America was the smallest species, weighing between 120 and 220 pounds, similar in size to modern jaguars. Smilodon fatalis is the most abundant species and was found all around North, Central, and parts of South America. They were as large as modern lions or tigers, weighing between 350 to 600 pounds. Smilodon fatalis is the species most commonly associated with the La Brea tar pits, where thousands of specimens have been unearthed. The third species and the largest, Smilodon populator, lived in South America, so we will discuss it when we get to that section. Unfortunately, we do not have any direct evidence of human encounters with Smilodon. Both humans and Smilodon would have competed for some of the same animals like horse, elk, and bison, and this overlap would have certainly led to encounters. Humans venturing into Smilodon territory would have needed to remain constantly alert, as an ambush from one of these cats would have been fatal. Considering humans and Smilodons lived alongside each other for at least 7,000 years, it strongly suggests that violent competition would have occurred at least at some point. Another saber-toothed predator that stalked North America was Homotherium, also known as the scimitar cat. Its canines were shorter than Smilodon's, but still up to 6 inches or 15 centimeters in length. They were lighter than the other big cats of the time at between 330 to 550 pounds. Unlike Smilodon, Homotherium had a much more elongated build, giving it the nickname the cheetah of the saber-toothed cats. It was a specialized predator, hunting in open landscapes and preying on large animals like young mammoths and horses. Some evidence even hints at possible scavenging interactions between Homotherium and human hunters, as both species sought out the same carcasses. Unfortunately, we don't have any direct evidence, but we did find a Homotherium cub this year in permafrost, as I covered in one of the last videos. When we think of Ice Age predators, saber-toothed cats take much of the attention, but in the Americas, there was an even larger and more powerful cat. The American lion was one of the largest cats to have ever existed. The largest individuals are estimated to have weighed over 1,100 pounds, nearly twice the size of a modern African lion. Males are estimated to have been between 500 to 1,150 pounds, while females were slightly smaller. Their bones were 10% longer in relation to modern lions, while also being comparable in robustness to the bones of a brown bear. The skull of this animal was absolutely massive. When I unboxed this reproduction, it was even more shocking than the short-faced bear skull. Sure, the short-faced bear is larger, but it is a big lumbering bear. The lion was agile and athletic. It is unbelievable to imagine that this animal could have run in excess of 30 miles an hour. Its massive skull came with a devastating bite. A fragment of a femur of a gray wolf from the La Brea tar pits was amputated with a single bite. The prime suspect for such an injury is the American lion. Research on the bite force of this animal estimates around 2,000 psi, twice the power of the bite of an African lion. The American lion was likely a stalk and ambush predator, much like modern big cats. Its hunting strategy would have relied on stealth, followed by a burst of explosive speed to overpower its prey. Its prey roster reads like a who's who of Ice Age megafauna, including bison, horses, camels, giant ground sloths, and possibly even young mammoths and mastodons. Unlike Smilodon, which use powerful forelimbs and saber-like teeth for precision kills, the American lion likely employed brute force, using its strong jaws and claws to bring down prey. Some studies even propose that American lions hunted in groups, similar to modern African lions. A pride of these massive cats working together could have taken down the largest prey, including fully grown bison or ground sloths. The American lion shared its habitat with early humans for thousands of years, and their paths undoubtedly crossed. Paleo-Indian hunters would have hunted some of the same prey of this animal, and this may have brought them into direct conflict. Unlike Smilodon, which favored ambush tactics and dense cover, American lions may have been more active on grasslands, where their size and speed gave them an advantage. This made them hard to avoid. It is absolutely terrifying to consider that this cat may have occasionally viewed humans as another prey animal. Without weapons and tactics, there would have been no defense against the raw power that these beasts possessed. Unfortunately, we don't have direct evidence that they attacked Paleo-Indians. Though considering we only have a few human remains from this period in the Americas, it is not that surprising. These people certainly lived alongside these animals, and there is no doubt that conflict would have occurred. It is fascinating enough that America was once home to a lion, though it is even more fascinating that it was once home to a cheetah, a giant cheetah. Miracyonyx, also called the American cheetah, was a very unique predator that once roamed North America. It weighed around 150 pounds, with the largest specimens reaching up to 210 pounds. It was not a true cheetah, but rather it convergently evolved traits built for speed. They were capable of running between 50 to 60 miles per hour. The existence of the American cheetah may explain why pronghorns, North America's fastest land animals, can run at speeds of up to 60 miles an hour, far faster than any predator alive today. It's as if they are ghosts of an evolutionary arms race, their speed a lingering memory of the cheetahs that once hunted them. Though recent studies may contest this notion. It wasn't nearly as specialized as the cheetah, as it had retractable claws and forearms meant for grappling prey. Their lifestyle may have more closely resembled mountain lions, with evidence that they regularly fought with other carnivores, which cheetahs generally avoid. But pronghorns made up around 40% of their diet, perhaps supporting the hypothesis that they were adapted to hunting these animals. It is certainly possible that pronghorns became ridiculously fast because of their speedy predators. Pronghorns are one of the most fascinating animals I have ever seen. Though you may assume that they are just another species of deer, their closest relatives are giraffes. They don't have antlers or true horns. They have a sheath of keratin that sheds yearly. During the Pleistocene, there were other species of pronghorn, some with 4 horns and some the size of a jackrabbit. Though in the modern day we're only left with one species. Seeing these animals in person is a direct legacy of the last glacial period. If you have ever been out west, you may understand just how charismatic the animals and landscape truly are. They help you imagine a glacial world of grasslands full of megafauna. A family friend of mine from a small town in Montana even found an entire mammoth skeleton eroding from a riverbank. Unfortunately, he wouldn't tell me or anyone else he knew where it was, definitely not science. That's just kind of how a lot of people are out there. The last iconic predator of Pleistocene North America we must talk about is the dire wolf. Dire wolves were larger and more robust than modern gray wolves, and funny enough, we found out pretty recently that they were not even wolves. DNA analysis found that they were 5.7 million years distant from modern wolves and could not interbreed with them. They were large and robust animals, with the largest weighing 175 pounds. In comparison, gray wolves typically weigh between 80 to 110 pounds. They likely lived in packs and actively hunted horses and bison. 4,000 individual dire wolves have been found at the La Brea tar pits, and they reveal a harsh and competitive world where predators often turned on each other for survival. Besides large mammalian predators, let's not forget that crocodiles and alligators lived on the south coast of North America. Though these animals are not extinct, they would have been a challenge for Paleo-Indians. They can grow to 16 feet in length and over 1,000 pounds. A simple fishing trip or drink of water may have been fatal. Imagine running from a short-faced bear only to escape by hiding in a pond, just to see a 16-foot alligator peeking at you from across the way. Pleistocene North America was true nightmare fuel. And just to make it worse, think about all the dangerous species of venomous snakes and insects which still roam North America. There are 20 species of venomous snakes in North America capable of killing humans, and many scorpions and spiders that were capable of deadly bites and stings. These people had to constantly be wary about their surroundings. The Americas provided these people with unprecedented hunting opportunities. Massive herds of Pleistocene horses roamed the plains. These animals would eventually go extinct at the end of the Pleistocene, only to be returned by the Spanish. However, some have hypothesized that small populations might have persisted, and we actually do have evidence that a few hundred lived until around 7,000 years ago. Horses were certainly hunted by Paleo-Indians, though they may have preferred bison. In many ways, the bison is the symbol of the American West. Though this didn't begin with the European settlers, the bison was a way of life for Native Americans for thousands upon thousands of years. The bison that they were hunting were not the same as our modern variety. 4 species of extinct bison once roamed the Americas. Bison latifrons was the largest bison of all time and weighed up to 4,400 pounds. The most common species of the Pleistocene was Bison antiquus, and it was as much as 25% bigger than modern bison, weighing up to 3,500 pounds. Antiquus was by far the most common species and is ancestral to modern bison. 2 other bison species, Bison priscus and occidentalis, were also larger than modern bison, but not by too much. These animals were the backbone of the diet of many predatory species, including ancient humans. Evidence from Clovis sites indicate that bison were driven into narrow arroyos and then slaughtered. As far back as 11,700 years ago, we have evidence that bison were led off of a buffalo jump. This hunting technique required a ton of foresight and planning to execute. But Paleo-Indian hunters already figured out this technique by the early Holocene and could have done it much earlier. An unexpected animal that once lived in North America is the western camel. Though we often think of camels traversing sand dunes or mountain ranges in Asia, the evolutionary birthplace of camels was actually in the Americas. During the Pleistocene, a species named Camelops hesterinus thrived from Alaska to Mexico. The species was up to 9 feet tall at the shoulder and 3,300 pounds. We even have evidence from the Wally's Beach site in Alaska that Camelops was butchered by humans, and probably hunted. One can imagine how tasty the fat-filled hump would have been to early humans. Another strange animal that roamed a similar range was the large-headed llama. Llamas first evolved in North America before spreading south, though the species was still widely spread during human arrival. It weighed around 660 pounds and was up to 7 feet tall at the shoulder. Another species, Paleo-llama, was around the same size, though much more common. It is weird enough to think that camels and llamas once roamed in my backyard. But an even weirder animal was the giant ground sloth. In North America, there were 4 species of these giants. The largest species, Eremotherium, weighed around 10,000 pounds and were up to 20 feet in length. The other species, like Jefferson's and Harlan's ground sloth, were smaller at 2,200 pounds. They were capable of standing on their hind legs and walking bipedally for short distances. These animals had large claws on their forelimbs, and some had hard bony deposits in their skin that would have acted as armor. We know this because we have found their fur in some southwestern caves. We also have piles of dung that have sat in caves for over 13,000 years. At Rampart Cave in Arizona, we have found thousands of pounds of sloth dung intermixed with the remains of American cheetah. How weird is it to think that sloths and cheetahs once competed for the same cave space? At White Sands National Park, we found the oldest evidence of humans in the Americas. It was determined that the humans were closely following ground sloth tracks. The tracks of the sloth then abruptly change direction and finally intersect with human tracks, possibly suggesting a confrontation. At other sites, we have direct evidence of interaction with humans and ground sloths. At the Aubrey site of Texas, 130 osteoderms have been found alongside 10,000 Clovis culture artifacts. Remains from the Kimswick site in Missouri also contain Clovis tools alongside sloth remains. Though we don't have sloth bones with direct cut marks, it is likely that Paleo-Indians were interacting with these animals, especially since they were a lot smaller than other dangerous game. The most interesting sloth from Pleistocene North America may have been Zipolonyx, the cave-climbing sloth. Many of the remains of this animal have been found in caves which are now underwater in Mexico, and the remains show adaptations to an aquatic or semi-aquatic lifestyle. I really wish the world still had a species of semi-aquatic ground sloth to hang out with. Another very unique animal that was directly related to ground sloths were the Glyptodonts. These veritable tanks were some of the most unique animals in all of the Americas. The largest in North America were around 6.5 feet long and weighed up to 3,300 pounds. 1,800 osteoderms covered their body like a giant turtle shell, with their head and limbs having some protection. Their heads were very heavily built with massive chewing muscles, and they honestly have one of the funniest skulls I've ever seen. You know, I don't mean to be rude, but it doesn't look like there was a whole lot of thinking going on in there. These animals were pretty much invulnerable to predators, especially when fully grown. Though ancient humans weren't like other predators, there were certainly a variety of ways that they could have isolated and killed a Glyptodon. At the Louisville site in Texas, there are Clovis artifacts found alongside disarticulated Glyptodon osteoderms, possibly suggesting they were hunted. There was much stronger evidence from South America that we will get to later. Another strange animal was Castroides, the giant beaver. The largest individuals could grow as long as 7.2 feet in length and weigh as much as 277 pounds. They had heavily built skulls and jaws with 6-inch long teeth. In many ways, they would have behaved like modern beavers, making dams and living an aquatic lifestyle. These animals survived for nearly 2,000 years after the end of the Pleistocene, and interestingly, indigenous people may even have a memory of these creatures. A widely known Anishinaabe story mentions giant beavers which walked upright and stood as tall as a man. Beavers are known to stand on their hind legs with the help of their tail. If Castroides were to do this, it would be seemingly as tall as a man and much heavier. It is fascinating to imagine that an oral tradition of these animals may have been carried on for thousands of years. It is also terrifying to think about an encounter with a giant angry beaver. Beaver can be aggressive, and if you've ever been canoeing by their homes, you may have heard them aggressively slap the water with their tails. It can be as loud as a gunshot when you are unprepared. We don't know if Castroides had a big tail like modern beavers, but they probably had some kind of tail, and maybe they made very loud noises with it. It must have been terrifying to encounter one of these animals when you weren't expecting them. The largest animals in North America were mammoths and mastodon. The Columbian mammoth was one of the largest species in the Americas. It stood 13 feet at the shoulder and weighed up to 22,000 pounds. That is twice the weight of an adult African bush elephant. The woolly mammoth was smaller, reaching around 10 feet tall and weighing around 13,000 pounds. It was better adapted to the cold than its larger relative. Lastly, the American mastodon was around the same size as the woolly mammoth, but stockier and suited to navigating dense forests. Despite the massive size of these animals, we know for certain that they were hunted by Paleo-Americans. To conclusively prove that an animal was killed by human hunters, there must be direct evidence of impact on its skeleton, such as cut marks or embedded projectile points. However, a mammoth or other large animal could be killed without leaving any trace on the bone, making direct evidence rare. Additionally, the fossil record is highly incomplete. Many skeletons are only partially preserved, meaning any impact marks that once existed may have been lost to time. As a result, evidence of hunting is vastly underrepresented, and the discovery of a single hunted specimen may suggest that hundreds were killed each year. This limitation in preservation means the true scale of prehistoric hunting is likely far greater than the fossil record suggests. At the Manus site located in Washington, a 13,800-year-old mastodon rib was found with a bone spear point embedded in it. The bone was likely made of mastodon bone and probably thrown as a projectile. This was before Clovis points were invented, though it is interesting that bone was used rather than stone. It is difficult to imagine the audacity of hurtling a spear towards such a massive and dangerous animal, yet it is somewhat easy to imagine why they were compelled to. My friend once told me, imagine watching your buddy land a perfect kill shot on a mammoth. It would be like hitting a game-winning shot. It is all too human to set off on a difficult and dangerous task in pursuit of pushing your own limits, and gaining the social prestige that comes with it. The Manus site is undeniable evidence that mastodon were hunted, and considering mastodon remains are relatively rare from the brief period humans were hunting, this may have represented a much more widespread practice of mastodon hunting. Butchered mastodon remains are found at many sites across North America, though we can't be certain if it was humans that were killing them. However, we have more evidence for the hunting of mammoths. At over a dozen sites from across North America, Clovis points are found in direct association with the remains of butchered mammoths. Friend of the channel David Howe even excavated one of these sites. Some argue that these remains were simply scavenged, while others argue that they were killed by Clovis hunters. Studies on contemporary indigenous populations in Africa hunting elephants with spears have proven it was possible. Researchers generally agree that the Clovis people could have killed mammoth, but they disagree that their hunting technology would have been a dependable and predictable means of getting the job done. But how would they have actually hunted mammoths? At the Colby Mammoth site, mammoths were speared and driven into a deep arroyo that they could not escape from. This strategy was repeated at the site for many years. It is fascinating to think of hunters basically herding mammoths to their ultimate end. They must have had a deep understanding of mammoth behavior in order to drive them into a deep arroyo, and perhaps dogs helped them. In Mexico City, of all places, archaeologists discovered 2 man-made mammoth traps containing the remains of at least 14 mammoths. These pits, dated to around 15,000 years ago, are among some of the first known structures built specifically for hunting mammoths, providing direct evidence of organized hunting strategies in the region. The pits were about 6 feet deep and 80 feet long, containing hundreds of bones. The skulls were flipped upside down, perhaps because the hunters were after the mammoth's tongues. The site is extraordinary to say the least. Digging such a large pit would have been a monumental task. Organizing hunters to start digging in hopes that they could trap a mammoth reveals that these people were capable strategists. This discovery is truly unique, though this practice may have been more widespread than we are aware of at the moment. However mammoths and mastodon were killed or acquired, Clovis people appear to have liked the taste of their meat. Chemical analysis from our only skeletal remains of a Clovis child revealed that his diet was dominated by mammoths. Again, this does not mean that people hunted this animal, it just means that they ate it, but it is a fascinating piece of the puzzle. Perhaps we will find more evidence that Clovis people were hunting mammoths regularly. We have covered most of the main creatures you would hear about when talking about Pleistocene North America, though there are plenty of animals no one has ever heard of, so let's cover them briefly. Multiple species of deer put our elk and whitetail to shame. The stag moose was a massive species weighing over 1,500 pounds, with a truly impressive set of antlers. The American mountain deer was a relative of the whitetail and mule deer, though much larger, with males weighing up to 600 pounds. As a Minnesotan hunter of whitetail, I am envious of the deer the first people of these lands got to see. Lastly, the Dakota palm deer was similar in size to a whitetail at around 200 pounds, and it had strange antlers similar to what we see on a European fallow deer. Euceratherium, known as the shrub ox, was a species related to the muskox that ranged widely in the American woodlands and weighed up to 1,300 pounds. Cuvieraneus tropicus was the last species of gomphothere to live in North America. It looked similar to an elephant, though it was only distantly related and had long spirally curving tusks. Holmesina, the giant armadillo, was 6.5 feet long and weighed up to 550 pounds. The western tortoise was a massive species at 5 feet long and up to 660 pounds. Aeolornis incredibilis was a massive relative of the vulture that had a wingspan of 16 feet and weighed up to 50 pounds. In Cuba, there lived the giant flightless owl, the largest owl to ever exist. It was 3'7" in height and weighed as much as 66 pounds. Though it wasn't able to fly all that well, it used its powerful legs to subdue prey and tear them apart with its beak. There are plenty of less interesting extinct animals that you could spend hours researching, but now let's move on to South America. Humans had been present in South America for likely over 20,000 years. The people present at Monte Verde 18,000 years ago had a broad diet including wild potatoes, berries, seaweed, and animals. But just as North America had the sudden spread of the Clovis culture and big game hunting technology, South America experienced a very similar phenomenon but with fish-tailed points. Clovis points made it to the region first and then developed into fish-tail points roughly 12,800 years ago. These points have a fluted base like a Clovis point but a wider blade. The makers of these tools appear to have been highly mobile hunter-gatherers that preferred regions full of megafauna. This is important to understand, as these people were highly capable hunter-gatherers, though they undoubtedly lived in a challenging and dangerous environment. Imagine the vast expanses of the Amazon, the towering Andes, and the endless grasslands of the Pampas, a world largely untouched by human presence. Though it supported some small human populations, it was essentially an untamed wilderness, where colossal herbivores roamed and formidable predators lurked. Perhaps the most terrifying adversary was Arctotherium. If you thought that the North American short-faced bear was impressive, believe it or not, the South American short-faced bear was much larger. Standing on all fours, it was around 5 feet tall on the shoulder, but on its hind legs, it towered over 11 feet. Even more impressive was its pure mass. At up to 4,000 pounds, it was one of the largest terrestrial mammalian carnivores to ever live. An extraordinarily large specimen found in Buenos Aires is estimated to have weighed between 2,100 to 4,500 pounds, though most likely around 3,700 pounds. It is also estimated to have stood between 11 to 14 feet tall on its hind legs. This makes it the largest bear ever found, and possibly the largest carnivorous mammal ever. Carbon isotopes suggest that it was omnivorous, but ate a surprisingly large quantity of meat. It would have been able to intimidate any predator off of a carcass, and its teeth suggest that it may have actively hunted very large animals. For an animal of this size, giant ground sloths, glyptodonts, gomphotheres, taxodontids, and other bears were all on the menu. Specimens of this bear often show multiple severe injuries that healed over their lifetime, suggesting violent encounters were common. Though these North American short-faced bears get all the attention, this animal may have truly been one of the most terrifying animals of the Pleistocene. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, humans never came across the largest species of Arctotherium, which went extinct thousands of years before humans were ever in the area. However, other Arctotherium species were still around the size of grizzly bears. The most deadly predator of Pleistocene South America was undoubtedly Smilodon populator. These animals were much larger than their northern cousins, with some reaching over 1,000 pounds. They were powerfully built, able to attack massive prey like giant ground sloths and prehistoric horses. It had the longest teeth of any saber-toothed cat, reaching up to 11 inches in length. These canines are so ridiculously large that it has even been hypothesized that they were used to intimidate other animals off of a kill. This may have indeed happened, but we know for sure that they actively hunted prey and regularly fought with each other. Across all Smilodon species, there is evidence that they turned their saber teeth on each other. This may have been done over territorial battles, over prey, or competition over breeding rights. 2 Smilodon populator skulls from Argentina display wounds from the canines of other Smilodon, and considering that the wounds are unhealed, they were likely fatal. Smilodon populator lived across a diverse array of environments from modern Venezuela all the way down to the far south of Patagonia. With the extinction of the largest species of short-faced bear, populator was the undeniable apex predator of all of South America. Despite the fact that humans would have lived alongside these animals for many thousands of years, as of now we have not found any evidence of interaction. Evidence of humans this far back in South America is rare in general, though perhaps humans also did their best to stay away from these animals. The second largest cat in South America was the giant Pleistocene jaguar. They were significantly larger than modern jaguars, with individuals reaching up to 460 pounds, comparable in size to modern lions. They survived in a diverse array of environments, including grasslands and dense rainforests. Like modern jaguars, they had a formidable bite force which allowed them to hunt many species, including alligators and caiman. As present today, mountain lions or cougars would have been present in various environments. though their smaller and more gracile build may have made it harder for them to compete with larger cat species. Another fascinating carnivore was Proto-Scion. Like cats, it was a hypercarnivore, meaning it heavily relied on meat, but unlike cats, it was a canid. It had a much more robust build than a modern wolf with strong jaws and shorter limbs. They were only around 80 pounds, but may have hunted in large packs. Their diet overlapped with that of Smilodon populator, suggesting that they hunted the same prey. Perhaps a testament to their ability to take something down that's much larger than them. Unfortunately, we don't have evidence of humans interacting with these animals, though once again it is likely to have occurred. Another interesting canid was Dusi-Scion, which was about the size of a German Shepherd. It was very distantly related to the other canids such as wolves and was even separated from the maned wolf by around 6 million years. Its closest relative was the Falkland Islands wolf, which survived into the late 1800s. Dusi-Scion itself survived well into historical times and may have even been kept as a pet by indigenous people. A grave from around 4,000 years ago contains a young Dusi-Scion, and another from the same region consists of the same thing except it's undated. Despite being only distantly related to dogs and wolves, they may have been captured while young and raised as part of a social group. It is thought that the animal only went extinct in the 1400s or even more recently. Though mammalian carnivores were a challenge, caiman, crocodiles, and alligators would have posed a significant threat. The Orinoco crocodile of Venezuela and Colombia is critically endangered due to hunting in the 19th century. Though in the past, males over 22 feet and weighing over 2,000 pounds were reported. This is as large as the biggest saltwater crocodiles ever recorded. Alligators and caiman can also be quite large and were much larger during the Pleistocene. Going for a drink or a swim could have been a deadly decision in Pleistocene South America. Snakes were another terrifying reptile these people would have encountered. In South America lives the heaviest snake in the world, the green anaconda. At 550 pounds and up to 30 feet in length, it could have swallowed a man with ease. Throughout South America, there are around 100 species of snakes that are venomous. These smaller snakes would have posed a greater threat than almost any other animal. Furthermore, around 20 species of insects and arachnids would have posed a significant threat through venom and transmitting deadly diseases. There was a lot of danger in South America, though there were also many massive herbivores susceptible to human predation. Horses native to the continent were very common and were an excellent animal to hunt. Numerous sites display that these animals were preyed on as early as 14,000 years ago. Macroacanids, a long-necked camel-like ungulate, were also preyed upon. They are commonly found around stone points and their bones bear cuts of butchery. Giant capybaras were another animal we find with butchery marks alongside stone tools. They could weigh up to 440 pounds, which is around twice the size of the largest modern capybaras. These three animals were reliably preyed upon, but what about larger and more challenging species to hunt? The glyptodons were far more diversified in South America than the North, with some species weighing more than an F-150. There were over a dozen species, and many giant ones over 2,000 pounds. Doedicurus was the largest and most fascinating of these species. They were nearly 5 feet tall, around 12 feet long, and weighed up to 5,200 pounds. The most fearsome weapon of Doedicurus was its massive, spike-covered tail club, a 3-foot-long battering ram of bone connected to a muscular, armored tail. Weighing 88 pounds and capable of striking 34 miles per hour, this prehistoric wrecking ball could unleash a devastating 2,500 joules of energy, a force that rivals some of the most powerful impacts in nature and history. For example, a 12-gauge shotgun slug generates around 2,500 joules upon firing. But instead of a small, fast-moving projectile, Doedicurus delivered that energy through its massive tail, which could weigh up to 140 pounds, capable of shattering bones of even the largest animals. Even ancient war machines pale in comparison. The onager, a powerful catapult used in siege warfare, could launch a 110-pound boulder at 25 miles an hour, delivering roughly the same amount of force as a Doedicurus tail strike. But while a catapult hurled its payload in one shot, Doedicurus could swing its tail club repeatedly. Imagine approaching this beast with a spear in hand, not aware of its fearsome defense. A blow from its tail would have certainly been fatal, and their thick armor would have made them nearly invulnerable to human projectiles. Despite this, we have evidence that they were hunted. At the site of Paypasso 1, spear points were found in association with Glyptodon and horses. At the site of La Moderna, stone tools were found in direct association to a butchered Doedicurus. These animals appear to have been butchered at the edge of a swamp in a single event. Perhaps this could suggest that the animal was immobilized in a swamp before being killed. It is impossible to know for sure. But how fascinating is it that thousands of years ago, ancient people were in a mucky swamp butchering a giant tank-like armadillo relative? Prehistory is truly more bizarre than science fiction. Another interesting aspect of this site is that it is only around 7,500 years old, meaning these animals survived the end of the Pleistocene and possibly even much later, though some have found issues with this date and believe it is a product of contamination. Either way, other sites also support that even the largest glyptodonts were hunted and butchered. The giant sloths of South America were also much more diverse and larger than their North American relatives. We have evidence that ancient humans interacted with ground sloths, not in bone or stone, but in the exceptionally painted walls of Serena de la Lindosa. This incredible site consists of an 8-mile stretch of cliff with thousands of paintings, dating back over 12,600 years ago. The most captivating image depicts 6 humans confronting a giant creature and its young. It is hypothesized that this is a giant sloth, protecting its young in front of what looks like a beehive. We will never know for sure if this is really a giant sloth, though it is tantalizing to think we are getting a glimpse into life 12,000 years ago. In South America, over a dozen diverse giant ground sloth species lived. Megatherium was the largest of the ground sloths at up to 8,800 pounds, comparable in size to an Asian elephant. It was around 20 feet in length and stood at around 12 feet on its hind legs. They had large, heavily built arms with absolutely massive claws over 7 inches in length. The anatomy of their forelimbs suggests that they had the ability to quickly and powerfully extend. Such massive claws coming from an animal as large as an elephant would have had devastating power. They may have been used to slash or simply stab into adversaries. Such an attack would have been right up there with a stab from a mammoth tusk or a Doedicurus tail bash. Despite their capabilities, humans are simply built different. The appearance of fish-tailed points in the pampas quickly correlated with the disappearance of these animals. At the site of Paso Otero 5, fishtail points are directly associated with the buried bones of Megatherium and other fauna. At Arroyo Seco, both Megatherium and Glyptodon bones were found butchered. It is clear that Megatherium wasn't safe. The similarly giant-sized Erytherium was widespread in North, Central to South America, and it preferred more tropical environments than Megatherium. An Eremotherium tooth from Brazil appears to have been modified by humans. A 2024 study confirmed that humans indeed altered the bone, though we don't know what for. Darwin's ground sloth, an intermediate-sized species, was quite peculiar. It was armored with osteoderms and adapted to grazing. Isotopic analysis of nitrogen of specific amino acids found that Darwin's ground sloth was an opportunistic omnivore, meaning it would have occasionally scavenged meat or even snatched up small animals when it got the chance. Many don't know this, but even deer will occasionally snatch up live birds and eat them. Deer are thought to do this to get calcium, salt, and phosphorus in their diet. This reasoning may have been similar for some species of ground sloth. One of the most fascinating reminders that South America was once a land of giant sloths are the massive burrows left over from the Pleistocene. It is estimated that over 1,500 are still intact across Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. Giant sloths were powerful diggers, using their strong claws to excavate. Claw marks can still be seen on the walls of these shelters. Some are up to 130 feet long and 5 to 6 feet in diameter. Giant sloths likely made these shelters to get away from predators, protect their young, and endure both hot and cold weather. Imagine being an ancient human just looking for some shelter in a small cave, venturing in and finding a massive aggressive sloth waiting inside. This must have been as terrifying as any other challenge in Pleistocene South America. Some have hypothesized that giant sloths may still exist somewhere in the most isolated regions of the Amazon. The evidence for this is not physical, but rather it comes from indigenous legends of large, shaggy, slow-moving clawed animals. In 1897, an Argentinian explorer named Ramon Lista reported finding a fresh-looking hide from a giant sloth. Other reports from the time period mention seeing a strange, large, shaggy creature. Though this idea is fascinating and I would love for it to be true, the evidence is quite weak. Such a large animal would need a relatively large breeding population, and no physical evidence suggests survival past around 10,000 years ago. I don't doubt that indigenous people have accounts of these animals, but these stories might date back all the way to the Pleistocene. We have accounts of Australian stories dating back this far. I wouldn't get your hopes up, but anything is possible, I guess. Another amazing animal from South America was Toxodon. It resembled a mix between a hippopotamus and a rhino, but belonged to a completely different lineage. These massive herbivores, weighing around 4,400 pounds, roamed the grasslands, wetlands, and riverbanks of Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, and Bolivia. Their large, barrel-shaped bodies and short, sturdy legs made them well adapted to traversing both swamps and open plains. At the already mentioned Paso Otero 5, Toxodon bones were burned and were found alongside fish-tailed points. Many other butchered specimens have been found. Gomphotheres were elephant-like relatives that thrived in South America. They were smaller than elephants and had long, curved tusks suited for digging and stripping vegetation. At 3 sites, including Monte Verde in Chile, Gomphothere remains were found with cut marks alongside stone tools. These animals were certainly butchered and eaten, though we cannot be entirely sure if they were hunted. 2 other species of large proboscidean lived in South America, Stegomastodon and Notiomastodon. Despite their names, they were not true mastodon, but were similar with compact bodies and straight tusks. They were around the same size as Asian elephants, and surprise, surprise, their remains have been found butchered alongside stone tools. All 3 proboscidean species would have been quite a challenge for these hunters, but the evidence seems to suggest that they were able to take these animals down. Personally, I do not underestimate the proficiency of these fishtail hunters. Now that we have covered the well-known animals, let's briefly mention some that you certainly have never heard of. Moronellophus, known as the South American moose deer, resembled an elk or reindeer and had massive moose-like antlers. Pompatherium was a giant armored armadillo much larger than any species alive today. Eutatus, or the long-shelled armadillo, appears to have been adapted to running fast while staying protected. Myocastor was a giant nutria weighing up to 110 pounds. Chapelmelania was a relative of raccoons, though it weighed up to 400 pounds. It went extinct over 1 million years ago, but it was too weird not to mention. The last animals that you might have expected to get a mention already were the Phorusrhacids, known as the terror birds. The largest were 10 feet tall and weighed over 700 pounds. They ran down prey with their massive legs and tore them apart with their beaks. These animals were the dominant predators in South America until the continent connected with North America and the Great Biotic Interchange occurred. The vast majority of Phorusrhacid species would go extinct shortly after, though some much smaller species survived until as recently as 100,000 years ago. The closest living relative to terror birds is the Ceramia, which are tall, mostly terrestrial birds that use their legs to kick and subdue small prey animals. Though harmless, they are a reminder that their ancestors once dominated these lands. As the Pleistocene ended, dozens of species of megafauna would go extinct. We still have a lot to discover about why these animals were doomed to extinction, though we are certain it was a combination of climate change, habitat loss, and human hunting. Evidence from the La Brea tar pits indicates that during the Bolin-Ellerod, 14,700 to 12,800 years ago, the climate became much drier for around 1,800 years. Massive wildfires ranged through Southern California, and Smilodon, direwolves, American lion, camels, and mammoth were all extirpated before the end of the Bolin-Ellerod. Humans then showed up on the scene later. We know this is what happened specifically in Southern California, though a similar story of dry, fire-prone conditions may have plagued the continent. After the Bolin-Ellerod, the survivors had to endure the Younger Dryas, which was a sudden cold period at the very end of the last ice age. Though speculation has been made that a comet caused the start of this period, definitive evidence for this hypothesis has never been found, and the Younger Dryas appears to be a routine event that occurs at the end of glacial periods. All this is to say, the climate was likely the main factor for the extinction of the megafauna. Though we shouldn't act like our species doesn't have blood on our hands. We know the Clovis people hunted megafauna, including mammoths, and the already struggling populations may have had the final nail put in their coffin by stone points. In South America, we may even have a clearer example of humans being the cause of megafaunal extinctions. A 2021 study found a strong relationship between the temporal density and spatial distribution of megafaunal species and fishtail projectile points. Fishtail points showed up, appeared at the same time and place as the megafauna, and after the megafauna went extinct, these stone points disappeared as well. Intrigued by these findings, Prates et al. 2022 looked closer at the fishtail points. They found that these points were not only temporally and spatially associated with megafauna, they were the most efficient technology available to hunt these animals. These points were hard to make, though they provided much more damage and penetration than smaller or less complex points. This technology was undoubtedly introduced from the north, and it was a game changer in the region. In only centuries, these points spread all over the continent, peaking in abundance at the same time megafauna populations rapidly declined. Afterward, fishtail points disappeared and these people began making points that were better suited for smaller prey. The extinction rates in South America were the highest out of any continent, with nearly all endemic animals to South America weighing more than 220 pounds going extinct by the Middle Holocene. It is possible that wielders of fish-tailed points may have contributed to these extinctions, though much work has to be done to prove this. These two papers make quite bold claims, while the fossil and archaeological record of Pleistocene South America is extremely sparse. The idea that these fishtail points were a large factor in the extinction of the megafauna is very intriguing, though as of now we are far from certain with this conclusion. The first Americans, whoever they were, walked into a world teeming with life. Some familiar, but many now lost to time. For thousands of years they survived amidst towering mammoths and saber-toothed cats. They endured, creating advanced fluted point technology, and ultimately triumphed as these animals perished. Were these humans directly responsible for the extinction of these animals? Well, they must have been some part of the equation. Though quantifying their effect on these populations of animals is extremely difficult. More discoveries need to be made, and more research needs to be conducted before we can be certain. While these creatures are gone, their bones, rock art, and even ancient footprints remind us of a world that once was. A world where Ice Age Americans stood face to face with the last great megafauna. The blood of these people continues to flow in the veins of many who call the Americas home. Their legacy is an excellent chapter in our story, the greatest story ever told. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, comment down below, and also hit the notification button so you're notified every time we have a new upload. I want to ask what you guys thought about the weapons testing in the beginning. You know, me throwing the Clovis spears into the organ blocks and all the blood and stuff. Was that pretty cool? Should I keep including that in future content? You know, I'm planning to make future videos where I actually, just solely about these weapons and weapon testing, like the weapons of the Neanderthals or the weapons of the Australian Aboriginals. So I just kind of want to hear some feedback about it. Also, on my second channel, Paleolithic Productions, I have a full uncut video of me testing those weapons, which includes a ballistics gel skull, and it's pretty cool. I threw some boomerangs at it and some other weapons, so definitely go check that out after this video. Also, complete shot in the dark here, but do any of you guys run any podcasts or know anyone who does? Because I want to go on a bunch of podcasts this year. You know, I have all these topics memorized, you know, megafauna hunting, everything you might want to know about Neanderthals. Like, I just all in my head, and I just want to go on podcasts and just spout all this information. You know, the world really doesn't know anything about prehistory, and I would really love to go on some podcasts and talk about these topics. So if you run a podcast, even if it's kind of small, or if you know anyone who runs a bigger one or something, hit me up at northo2bank@gmail.com. All right, that's all I got planned. Leave a comment on this video to help the algorithm, you know, like it, everything. Thanks for watching. See you the next time. Arrivederci. Bye.